Hey guys, welcome back to Vince Bell Custom. So today we're going to do either a video or video series on making two-part molds for an item that you either sculpted yourself and you want to make copies of. Maybe you had somebody else sculpt you an item, or even if you had a 3D printer print something out and you don't want to, use your original sculpt and you want to make resin copies of it. So this will give you guys an idea on, what's involved, pricing, all the stuff that you need to get to do this. Now, it's not very cheap. It is kind of expensive, but if you slowly build up your stockpile of gear and tools, you can get into it and you can be doing it yourself. Now, I don't mold and cast all year long. I do it maybe once a year, if that, or twice a year, and I usually do it in the summertime. So I'm going to kind of break down of like how I make my two-part molds of what I've learned, a lot of videos I watched, a lot of just reading and just, learning from a friend. Now, I'm sure a lot of pros out there that might watch this video series or video, they might say, hey, if you did this, you did that, or you're doing this wrong, you're doing that. And I'm like, I'll take all information I can get, but I kind of want to help a lot of the new people to the hobby too, to give them an idea if they ever wanted to sculpt something or if they wanted to get into it, kind of what's involved, and, just go from there. Now, I like to use Mold Max 30 for my two-part molds only because from what I've read, the Mold Max 30 is very durable. Like if you make your two-part molds and you start making copies of something, you can pull out like, I don't know, like 25, 30 or even more of that item from that mold because this mold is really good before it starts to deteriorate or get bad or over time. So it's always good to kind of take your original item and make the molds and make resin copies, because this way, if you ever, you're done with those copies, you painted it, you gave them away or whatever, and you need to make more, you can always make another mold from your original item. You don't want to make molds from a resin copy and then a resin copy and a resin copy, because it's like third, second, fifth generation type stuff. So you always want to keep your original intact and then make your copies and paint those. So I'm going to go over all the stuff that I have here. Give you guys an idea of pricing of what stuff costs, and then we'll start making all the molds for it. Now, like I said, I'm not a pro at this, but from what I've done so far in the past couple of years, it's been working, so we'll go from there. Now, I also don't have a lot of top-end gear, too, so I have a lot of just cheap stuff I got off of eBay, but it still works, and as long as you get your final resin copy and everything's cured and working, that's all that counts. So, first thing is, you need the items that you're going to be making molds off of. So this right here is a custom head for a statue I'm working on, 2 hair pieces, and that's another brooch for a legendary scale bust that I'm working on. So gives you an idea of the items we're using. Now, these are small items. We don't need a lot of mold for this stuff, but it's cheaper to buy the gallon kit Mold Max 30 than it is to buy smaller trial kits, because it's better to have more mold than less and then screw up. So Mold Max 30 gallon kit, it costs around, I would say, I think it's around like $90 to $100. Plus, if you have to pick it up with shipping, it's fairly expensive. So at least get yourself a gallon kit if you're going to be doing a lot of stuff. Now, from what I understand too, the Mold Max 30 has like a 6-month shelf life. So if you buy it, you open it and use it, you can't really keep it for a long time. I mean, I've learned that lesson too, where I bought something in the summertime, I opened it up, I used some of it, I didn't use all of it, I let it sit in my studio all winter long, and then when I went to use it in the springtime, it was all caked up and it was bad. So you got to kind of use it when you get it. So that, you also need foam core blocks. So these are all foam core sheets. You can see all the white sheets. You get those for like $1 or $2 at Michael's if they have a sale. They're not that expensive, but they're really good for making your, your boxes for the stuff. You can use cardboard. You can use whatever else you want. From what I've seen people, I know some people over, I think it was in Japan or China, I saw videos where they make circles, and they make circle molds for all their items. So I mean, you can do whatever you can. It just whatever works for you. For me, we're going to do blocks on these items. Of course, nice T-square. If you have one of these laying around, if not, you can snag one of those. At the bottom of the foam core, that little wooden piece is a drawing board. You put sheets of drawing and you can put it in your lap and draw. I had that since like art school in 1998. I use this one now for cutting stuff so I don't slice up my floor and everything. You also need oil-based clay. I'm pretty sure it's oil-based clay. It doesn't really bake. It just kind of use it for sculpting. I don't really know. My friend just gave me some of his extra, and I just use it for his stuff. I never really picked it up. From what I understand, it's fairly cheap. Hot glue gun makes your life a lot easier. You get these for a couple bucks, and you get them for like a couple bucks, like at Michael's or whatever too. Now over here, this is a can of mold release. Now this is like a $15-16 can, I think, after shipping. You need this for when you want to put the second part of the mold in, so the two silicone sides don't bond together. You can also use this for when you do make your final mold and you want to spray mold release into the mold and make copies. But the only problem is I don't like using mold release on all the resin because then the resin becomes slick. So we'll kind of get into all that. So right now, this is where we start with the items. So you need your Sculpt, you need a couple of these supplies. So you're looking right now close to around, I don't know, say around $160, I guess, maybe in supplies so far. Not to mention the item that you have the sculpt, whether you paid somebody to sculpt it or you sculpted it yourself or you had to 3D print. Now we also have a vacuum chamber we'll be getting to too, but for right now what we're going to do is we're going to set up the blocks of the foam, and then we'll start putting the items in there with the oil-based clay, and then once all that's done, we'll show you how to mix up the mold and do all that other stuff. So it's going to be kind of a long process, but once we're said and done, we'll have nice good molds we can make copies off of these items. Okay, so I did a couple markings here and there with my blue pencil. At first I felt that it was too small. I could be doing this wrong. Maybe I'm making this box way too big. So what I'm thinking is I want like about an inch around the whole item. I like to have a bigger box just to kind of make sure I can kind of squeeze it together. We'll get into that down the line. So this is how the item is going to be fit. This is the bottom of the box. This piece will be gone. This piece, like when I cut this out, that's gone, that's gone, that's gone, that's gone. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to score it, and then I'm going to fold these pieces together and I create my box. Now, this is how I want to see the head at the bottom of the box. Now the other problem is we're going to have the head probably tilted a little bit this way, or I guess maybe straight on. It's going to be kind of hard because when you pour, I got to think about how it's pouring into the item. So if I'm pouring into the item this way, and the resin comes down, it comes up, it might create an air bubble here. So it's like, do you have to have the head turned just a little bit, so this way when the resin comes in, it comes here and then it fills up this way. So I got to kind of think about how much room I'm going to have this tilted type thing. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to cut these pieces out, but this like this cross is going to stay, and then I'm going to fold this stuff. So I'm going to start scoring this stuff up. We'll see how this works out. Maybe I went too high on these pieces. I'm not sure yet. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to kind of score this stuff out, and then we'll start folding it together, and I'll give you guys a better idea of what I'm trying to do. Like this, but the problem is looking at it, it's like so, that's just way too high. This box is just, we got to cut off a little bit of it. So I decided with black lines, we're going to have 2 inches here and 2 inches up top, and that should be pretty good. So when the head is in here, it's going to be in that middle line, like so. That's kind of where I have to keep the line because it's going to be split here. Now, the idea is when this is in here, this is the bottom of the head. This is what it's going to look like, right? We're going to have the head like so. It's going to be like right about there, and then we'll have the box like this, and the head's going to be in the middle of that. Now we have to think about the pour spout, like how is this going to be poured in. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the camera down a little bit like so, right, and then so this is where the head's going to be like this, okay. So the head's going to go into the box. So now when we make the two-part molds, you think about the mold is going to be split like so. So the head, if we have the head tilted this way, right, and we pour the water, the resin coming in here, the resin comes in and then we create a bubble at the chin. What we need to do is we need to have the pour spout coming in and the head's tilted this way. So this way when you're pouring it in, it's coming at this angle, it's coming down, filling in, and then the bubble, any bubble here will come back up and around. So you got to have it at an angle when you do it. You can't have it like this, because then what you would have to do is you would have to have a pour spout here, and then you would have to have an air bubble spout coming up this way. So to make life easier, it's got to be turned this way. Now, it's possible that maybe some of the ear areas, like around there, might get a little bit of bubbles. But if we have the head split like so, so the idea is we're going to have the line coming here, around the ear, and then around the top of the head. So that's where the split is going to be on the head. So that's kind of like how I want it to split. It's coming about the back of the ear. So this way, when you have the two-part mold and you kind of squeeze it together or kind of split it, what'll happen is the little bubbles will come out of there. So you got to mark, you know, where you want the split of this going. So it's going around the ear and then coming back that way. So that's kind of like where we want the split. That's not going to be completely perfect, but just giving you guys an idea of how we're going to split the clay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut off the top of these blue mark pieces that I have up here, and then I'm going to hot glue these pieces together, because you want a perfect seal on these edges. Because if you don't have a perfect seal and you put in all your mold, it will leak through here, and then leaking through here and then coming out in the bottom, and then you're creating air bubbles, and it's a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is off camera is I'm going to use my hot glue, and I'll use some tape, and I'll get a nice good box going. I have a habit of always burning myself with hot glue. I don't know why. It's been like that ever since art school. So you don't want to see me just burning skin grass off with this thing. But we're going to get this all set up with a nice box and go from there. And the other thing too is always make sure you keep your extra pieces that you cut off. The reason why you keep your extra pieces is when we make our mold, right? Once this mold piece is done, and we pour in the mold on this side, we put another piece of block up here, not this block, but we'll put another piece of block, or you can use this one, and then we flip it, right? And you flip it, and you cut out this part, you pull out the clay, and then you have the head with the mold on the bottom, and then what you do is you pour your next set of mold. We'll get to that, but you know, just make sure that, you know, your scraps, you keep all your scraps because you're going to need them. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to cut out the rest of these pieces here. I'm going to get this all hot glued, taped up, and then we'll go from there. This is made up. This one right here is a fairly large box. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are saying you don't need to make that much of a big box. Only reason I'm doing it is because I need to get into the area. Like I said, I'm still learning and I'm still practicing. Plus, I got so much of that mold in that container, it's going to go bad if I don't use it. So I figured I might as well make a nice, good, sturdy mold for this head so I can make a couple copies. So I also have to make sure I angle that correctly. Now what I did is I cut this piece off here and I pushed it in because it was too long. As you can see, I did hot glue around here and tape. Now I'm pretty sure this tape isn't going to really hold. I'll probably do a better piece of tape around this box just to be on the safe side, because I don't want to accidentally snap this or it buckles or anything like that. I did do these other pieces here as well for the hair. I got these boxes made up. So we're pretty good. This box is a little bit thinner, only because this hair is fairly thin. I don't need to make a crazy one for this one. This one's a little bit longer, only because I have to have this at an angle when I pour in. I can't have it straight. I got to have it kind of go on an angle, so I got to work. That one's a little bit tricky from what I can tell. So next step is we get our oil-based clay. Now I'll put on rubbers and gloves. I will also get my hair dryer, because I use a hair dryer to kind of melt this stuff to get it nice and soft. I think in the past my friend told me you put this stuff in there and you use what was it, alcohol to kind of, and a paintbrush to smooth it out. I was doing that in the beginning and it was just becoming a mess. So now what I do is I just use dentist tools and I use a hair dryer and melt it, and what it does is it just melts the stuff and it gets nice and smooth and goes where I need to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to do just like kind of like a fast part of the video of me pushing in clay, and then once we start getting the clay in there to where we need it, then what I'll do is we'll stop and I'll show you some more of the detailing and then how we get everything set up. Alright, so we got a lot of the clay in here and it's pretty softened up pretty well. As you can kind of see, it kind of moves around pretty decent. So next, we're going to put the head in. Now, like I said, we have to have the head at a certain angle. So this is the back of the head here, and then I need to turn it this way. So this piece is going to go like so. It's going to have to go like that. So what we need to do is we need to get a little bit more back here. So take a nice good chunk and heat it up. Okay, we got a lot of that heated up. Now the good thing about this clay is it's oil based, so it won't really cause any issues. I think what we need to do is bring this in a little bit more, like so. So if we pour it in the pour spout, that's exactly kind of where we want it. So we want to even this up. Now, we got that in there. We need to kind of start cleaning it up. So what we got to do is we got to start pushing the clay around the edges. We got to get it behind the ear. So the other thing too is while you're doing this, you have to think about when you flip it over. Because after we pour in the mold here and we flip it over, we got to pull the clay out. Now, it's easier to get the mold and going around here and go around the face and then worry about the back of the head. Whereas if you put the head in first, and then you did pour in the back of the head, then you got to pull out the clay. You get clay in all this detail here. So, like I said, I'm pretty sure other people have better ways of doing this stuff, but this is kind of what I'm doing at the moment, and it seems to be working. So I'm still using my glove. It's still kind of messy. I just didn't want to get the oil clay all over my hand just yet. So what we're going to end up doing now, the other thing too is if you sculpt it in wax and you use the blow dryer method and heat all this up, it probably wouldn't work. It would probably soften up all the wax. Since this is a 3D print, it works. So the reason why we're going around the edge and the ear and all that stuff is because that's where you'll get your flashing from the mold. Like I talk about in a lot of my kit review videos, how you get that flashing. Because you're getting like the splits and where you're getting the pour spouts and all that. Now the top of the head up here I don't need to worry about. I mean, even if it gets a little bit messy on top of that head, hair's going to go over that anyway. It's the back of the head, the neck, and the ears is what you want to be very careful of in this specific mold. So we got a little bit of mold in there. We're doing good. What I need to do is kind of fill up a little more. Because you could, if you see around the edge here, we still got that middle line to kind of fill up. Other things too I've done in the past, if it's a big block and it's a big thing, you could put a piece of wood there and you could put the item on the piece of wood and then throw clay around. It doesn't matter what's underneath here. What matters when you pour this in, if it doesn't seep in anything or seep behind the item or seep in the area. As long as this piece is nice and even and works out, you don't have to do anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up some more clay, get it in here. We'll come back when I'm ready to start doing like line work and detailing around it, and then we'll finish that up. Okay, so we got a lot of it in there. We got it smoothed out and everything. So what we need to do is start cutting up the edges. So what I like to do is just use my dentist tools I have here. They're not sharp. They're just regular tools. And you can kind of start cutting the edge and making stuff smooth and get all this out of here. So you just come around here. If you got any other types of tools, you can use them. You can use rubber tip tools, sculpting tools like this here. You can use stuff like this to kind of hit in corners, bring stuff down, stuff like that. Now the hard part and what you start doing is you start, like, you can use this to go around the edge of the ear. Make sure, because we don't want any of the silicone to go in any places that are going to make life living hell. You want to make sure it's nice and even. And then what I do is I take my tool and I do a nice little bit of a line going around there. So you start to get sort of a little bit of a clean line going, and then you can kind of take your tool and go like so. Now, like I said, I'm sure other mold makers know how to do a way better job than me, but this has kind of been working for me so far. So it's just a matter of playing with it, getting the line where you want it to go. Also, the other thing too is we want to be careful when you do this. If you got any clay on your hands or gloves, right, and you kind of hit things, if you get chunks of clay in the nose, nostrils, and the eyes, and then you pour your mold in, and when you pull your mold off, that clay will screw up your whole casting. So you want to be very careful where this clay is going and not to mess up the sculpt. Sculpt once clean. And when you pull out the clay on the other side after we do this, you want to make sure that that side doesn't have any clay in specific areas too. So it's just a matter of keep playing with it, making sure this is nice and smooth, because the idea is, I mean, even if it's kind of wavy, it's okay as long as the two pieces connect. You know, the two side molds connect. That's what we want to do. So just keep cutting this stuff on the sides. And like I said, if you're lazy and you don't want to do two-part molds, you could just do one single part mold, but I like the two, only because I like getting baby powder in there and everything. So as you can start to see, we're getting a nice, good, clean block, and everything's looking pretty good so far. So we're just going to keep doing this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is sort of keep cleaning this up. It's going to be hard to do it within the camera because I got to get in here and I got to like focus. But we'll come back once everything is pretty much cleaned up and it's all nice and smooth, and then I'll show you the next step of pushing in keys, and we'll explain that next. Alright, so we got the head in there. It's all looking pretty good. I smoothed it out as the best I could, and it's pretty much locked in there. So next is we create keys, because if you pour your mold in here now, and you flip it, and then you pour your mold in there, it's just a flat surface. It's just flat, and nothing's going to stay connected. So you have to create keys, and you can pretty much use anything. You just want to make sure whatever you use that it's kind of smooth and it won't actually grab. So I've seen some people use square keys in the past. I've used like on bigger items like ends of a marker like this. But for this one, what we're going to do is use this paintbrush end, because it's kind of really smooth at the bottom and it sort of kind of comes at an angle. You don't want anything going too deep, but you don't want anything that's just not working. So when I say keys, you sort of just kind of press in and you go straight. You don't have to go too far with it, but you just kind of start creating a locking mechanism, like so. So you just start doing stuff like that. So I'm going to go around and do all this stuff. We'll get it. So this way, when you pour in the mold, you pour in the stuff, you flip it around, you take out all the clay, you have all these prongs sticking out of your mold. And therefore, what happens when you do your other mold and you put them together, they lock. And that's what you want to create. So we'll go around, we'll do all this. It's just tedious work. And then we'll come back and hopefully we'll get all the other ones ready too. Alright, so we got the piece all set up. Now, as far as the little keying mechanisms that I put in there, you don't want to go too far, but you don't want to go too, you want to get enough where when you put the pieces together, they kind of connect and it kind of creates a good connection where it won't do it. So you got to kind of go around it all and everything. Now, I didn't do over here because what's going to happen right here is I'm going to cut the mold once I make it and everything, and that's going to become my pour spout. So as you can see, the head is going to be down like that. I'm going to pour the resin in that way, and therefore the resin comes in and it flows up and it comes up this way. Now it's possible that the back of the neck might get a little bit of an air bubble, but we'll figure that out when I start doing it. The main thing is I don't want the air bubble on the chin or the face or ears, anything like that. So right now we're looking pretty good. We got a nice good block going. The next step is I'm going to do up the other items with their blocks, and then what we'll do is we go into the garage and we start mixing up the mold and we start pouring it in.